"Lauren, where did you get the money to buy a house?" That was the first thing my mother said to me. Not hello. Not I missed you. Not happy belated birthday. By the way, because she had forgotten that too, just like she had every year for the past 6 years. No, the first words out of her mouth, standing in my father's living room with her arms crossed and her jaw tight, were about my money. And honestly, I wasn't even surprised. But before I tell you what happened in that room, what my father said, what my brother did, and exactly how I walked out of that house for the last time, I need to ask you something first. Have you ever felt completely invisible inside your own family? Like you could disappear tomorrow, and nobody would notice until they needed something from you? Because that's what I felt for 29 years. And if that's ever been you, I need you to stay with me until the end of this story. Because the ending is the part they never saw coming. Tell me where you're watching from right now. Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house in Houston, Texas, with my parents and my younger brother, Ryan. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly normal family. My father worked in insurance. My mother stayed home. Ryan and I went to public school, played in the same neighborhood, ate dinner at the same table every night. But if you had been inside that house, if you had watched closely, you would have noticed something that I didn't fully understand until I was an adult. Ryan and I were not treated the same. Ryan was the sensitive one. That's what my mother always said. He needed extra support, extra encouragement, extra patience. He had big dreams, she told people at church, at the grocery store, to anyone who would listen. Ryan wanted to be a filmmaker, then a musician, then a podcast host, then a content creator. The dream changed every 18 months or so, but the support never wavered. Whatever Ryan needed, Ryan received. I was the responsible one, which, in my family, turned out to be a polite way of saying that I was the one who didn't need anything. I got straight A's, and nobody hung them on the refrigerator. I ran cross-country, and my parents came to meet my entire high school career. I applied for colleges on my own, filled out the financial aid forms on my own, figured out the deadlines and the essays and the recommendation letters completely on my own. My mother proofread Ryan's application to a film program he found on YouTube. She sat with him for 3 weekends straight. But I told myself it was fine. I was the responsible one. I could handle it. I didn't need to be babied the way Ryan did. When I was 17, my grandmother on my father's side passed away. She had always been kind to me, the kind of grandmother who remembered which flavor of birthday cake you preferred and asked about your friends by name. I cried at her funeral. Ryan cried louder. A year later, I found out from my aunt, not from my parents, but from my aunt, at a Christmas gathering, almost by accident, that my grandmother had left money behind for both me and Ryan. A college fund. She had set it aside specifically for our education. Enough to cover a significant portion of tuition at a state school. I felt a warmth in my chest when I heard that. My grandmother had thought of me. Even from wherever she was, she had made sure I was taken care of. I never saw that money. Not then. Not when I enrolled in college. Not when I took out student loans to cover what the financial aid didn't. I assumed it was tied up in the estate, that it would come eventually. I was young, and I trusted that my parents were handling it. I focused on school and told myself I would ask about it later. Later never came. Or rather, I let it go. I was busy. I was working 2 jobs while carrying a full course load in accounting. I didn't have time to chase down a conversation my parents clearly didn't want to have. I graduated in 3.5 years with a degree in accounting and a minor in finance. I had $47,000 in student loan debt and a job offer from a mid-sized firm in Austin, Texas. I packed my car, said goodbye to my childhood bedroom, and drove 4 hours north with everything I owned. Ryan, at that time, had just dropped out of his second community college and was telling everyone he was going to launch a YouTube channel about authentic living. My parents threw him a party for it. I am not exaggerating. They had a cake. In Austin, I worked. That is the simplest way I can describe the next 6 years of my life. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I moved up at the firm. I got my CPA. I started doing freelance accounting on evenings and weekends for small business owners. I saved aggressively. I learned everything I could about real estate investing. I bought a small rental property at 25 and another one at 27. I paid off my student loans in 4 years. I didn't have a lot of time for family during those years, which honestly suited both sides just fine. I called my mother on major holidays. I texted my father on his birthday. I flew home for Christmas every other year and smiled through dinners where the entire conversation somehow revolved around Ryan's latest project or Ryan's latest setback or what Ryan might need next. One Christmas, Ryan announced he needed a professional camera setup to take his content to the next level. By January, my parents had spent $3,000 on equipment. By March, the camera was in the closet, and Ryan had decided YouTube wasn't his thing after all. The next year, it was a podcast recording studio setup, then a course on dropshipping, then an online certificate in digital marketing that he enrolled in and never completed. Every birthday mine came and went without a card, without a call, without even a text one year. I want to be precise about this because it matters. My mother forgot my birthday 4 times in 6 years, not the date she knew the date. She simply chose not to acknowledge it. Ryan's birthdays involved dinner reservations and a gift budget my parents actually discussed in advance. The year I turned 28, I called my mother at 9 o'clock in the evening, hoping she'd at least mention it. We talked for 11 minutes about whether Ryan should take a loan from my father to start an e-commerce business. She never said happy birthday. When I mentioned it gently, almost apologetically, because that's how conditioned I was, she said, "Lauren, you know I have a lot on my mind with your brother right now." I said okay. I got off the phone. I sat on my couch in my Austin apartment and I cried for about 20 minutes. Then I got up, made myself dinner, and decided something had to change. Not in my family. I had stopped expecting change from them a long time ago. Something had to change in me specifically, how much access they had to me and my life. I pulled back. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. I just stopped reaching out first. I stopped calling on holidays if they didn't call me. I stopped mentioning what I was working on, or what was happening in my life. If they asked, I gave vague, cheerful answers, and moved on. In the year and a half that followed, my mother called me twice. Neither time was on my birthday. During that same period, I sold one of my rental properties at a significant gain, pooled that with my savings, and made an offer on a condominium in a newer development on the east side of Austin. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small balcony, building with a rooftop terrace. The kind of place I had imagined living in when I was 19, and broke and exhausted and telling myself it would be worth it. I paid $340,000, putting down 80% in cash. I moved in on a Saturday in October. I took photos of every room and posted them on Facebook because I was proud, because I had worked for years for that moment, and because I was allowed to be happy about something I had built entirely on my own. I had forgotten that my father followed me on Facebook. My phone rang 40 minutes after I posted. "Lauren." His voice was different than usual. Tighter. "Is that your place? That condo?" "Yes," I said. "I just moved in today." There was a pause. "How did you afford that?" I told him I had been saving and investing for years, and that I sold a property. I kept it brief. I wasn't hiding anything, but I also didn't feel like I owed him a detailed financial accounting of my adult life. Another pause. "Your mother and I need to talk to you. All of us together. Can you come home this weekend?" I almost said no. Something in my stomach told me to say no, but I had not been home in almost a year, and some old part of me, the part that still believed families could be reasonable if you just gave them enough chances, said yes. I drove to Houston on a Saturday morning. 4 hours. I stopped once for coffee and spent most of the drive reminding myself to stay calm, to be open, to not assume the worst. I walked in the front door, and my mother looked at me the way you look at someone who has done something wrong but hasn't admitted it yet. "Lauren, where did you get the money to buy a house?" No hello, no hug, no "you look great," or "how was the drive?" Just that. I set my bag down slowly. "It's a condo, Mom. And I told Dad I've been investing in real estate for the past several years. I sold a property this fall and used the proceeds." She looked at my father. My father looked at the floor. Ryan was sitting on the couch. He had gained weight since I last saw him and was wearing a hoodie with the name of a podcast I had never heard of. He did not say hello either. He was scrolling on his phone with the energy of someone who had been told this meeting was going to be good for him. "We want to talk about the family," my father said. He had this way of saying the family that made it sound like a legal entity, something with bylaws and obligations. "We think it's time we all got on the same page about things." "What things?" I asked. "Your situation," my mother said. "Your financial situation." I kept my voice even. "My financial situation is fine, better than fine." "What exactly do you want to discuss?" My father cleared his throat. "Your brother has been having a hard time." I looked at Ryan. Ryan continued scrolling. "Ryan is 26 years old," I said. "What's going on?" What followed was a 20-minute explanation that I will compress for you here, because the details are almost beside the point. The gist was this. Ryan had tried several business ventures over the past 2 years. They had not worked out. He owed my parents money, a number that came out slowly, like my father was hoping a smaller figure might land softer, until eventually he admitted it was a little over $22,000. Ryan also wanted to try one more thing. He had a new idea. He had done research. He just needed startup capital. He needed about $15,000. They looked at me. The silence in that room was extraordinary. "You want me to give Ryan $15,000, I said. "We think of it as a family investment," my mother said. "A loan," my father added quickly. "He'll pay you back." Ryan looked up from his phone for the first time. He had the expression of someone who has been told he deserves something and has simply been waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "I'm not going to do that," I said. My mother's face went through several emotions in quick succession. "Lauren, he's your brother." "I know who he is," I said. "I'm still not going to do that." "You have the money," she said, and her voice had an edge now. "You bought a condo. You obviously have money to spare." "Whether I have money or not isn't the question," I said. "The question is whether I'm going to give $15,000 to someone who has burned through every dollar anyone has ever given him and is currently sitting on this couch instead of working." And the answer is no. Ryan made a sound. It was somewhere between a scoff and a sigh. Typical Lauren. "Excuse me?" "Always looking out for yourself." He put his phone down. "We're family. We're supposed to help each other." And something in me cracked open. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a tearful way. More like the last coat of paint finally peeling off something that had been worn down for years. "Ryan," I said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about the answer. When has anyone in this family helped me?" No one said anything. "When I applied to college, who helped me? When I was working 2 jobs to pay for school, that I took out loans for loans, by the way, that I paid off myself. Where was the family investment then? When I graduated, did anyone drive to Austin? When I turned 28 and called Mom on my birthday, and she spent the whole call talking about whether you should take a loan from Dad, who was looking out for family then?" My mother's chin lifted. "You've always been independent. You didn't need." "I was independent because I had no choice," I said. "There's a difference." Another silence. And then I said the thing that had been sitting in the back of my mind for 11 years. "What happened to the college fund?" The shift in the room was immediate. My father went very still. My mother's expression changed in a way I had never seen before. Not anger, but something closer to caught. "What college fund?" Ryan asked. And he sounded genuinely confused, which was the only moment in that afternoon I felt anything soft toward him. "My grandmother left money for both of us," I said, keeping my eyes on my parents. "A college fund. I found out when I was 18. I went to college and took out loans. I never saw that money. I never asked about it because I was young, and I trusted you. So I'm asking now, what happened to it?" The pause before my father spoke was the longest pause of my adult life. "We used it," he said. "We needed it at the time. We were going to pay it back." "You used my college fund. Things were tight. You used the money my grandmother left me for my education to pay for things in this house, while I was taking out loans and working double shifts, and you never told me." My mother said, "We took care of you your whole life. You took care of Ryan, I said. It wasn't an accusation, it was just a fact, delivered as plainly as I could manage. You took care of Ryan. And you told yourselves I was fine, because I always found a way to be fine. And every time I was fine, it made it easier to take something else and give it to him instead. Nobody argued with that. I think, somewhere in that room, they knew. I picked up my bag. I'm not giving Ryan any money, I said. I'm not making a family investment. I'm not taking a meeting about this ever again. My father said, Lauren, sit down. Let's just... I drove 4 hours to be told that my success is a resource for this family to decide how to distribute, I said. I'm going home, Ryan said. So that's it? You're just leaving? I looked at him. There was a version of me that wanted to be angrier at Ryan. But when I looked at him, 26 years old, hoodie, phone, the expression of someone who had been handed so much that receiving had become his only skill, I mostly felt tired. Yeah, I said. That's it. I drove back to Austin the same afternoon. I put on music and I kept the windows down, even though it was November, and a little cold. Somewhere around San Antonio, I started crying, and I let myself do it for about 20 miles, and then I didn't anymore. There's a specific grief that comes with accepting something you've known for a long time but kept hoping might be different. It doesn't feel like surprise. It feels like finally putting down something heavy that you didn't realize you were still carrying. Over the next several weeks, a few things happened. I spoke to an attorney about the college fund. This is important, and I want to be honest with you about it. I was told that given the informal nature of how the inheritance had been handled, passed through my parents as informal custodians, rather than a formal trust, recovery would be difficult and litigation would likely cost more than the original amount. It was not the answer I wanted. But I made a record of everything, documented what I knew, and decided what to do with that information. I also changed my social media privacy settings, and I sent my parents a letter, not an email, a physical letter that said essentially this: I love you, and I am choosing to step back from this relationship until there is a genuine acknowledgement of what happened and a willingness to have a different kind of conversation. I am not cutting you off forever. I am protecting myself until something real changes. If that day comes, you know where to find me. I have not heard back. It has been 7 months. My condo has a plant wall in the living room now that I'm very proud of. I host a small dinner party once a month for friends who remember my birthday. 2 weeks ago, a colleague brought a cake to the office with my name on it and 31 candles, and everyone stood around and sang, and I cried a little and laughed at myself for crying and ate 2 slices. I think about Ryan sometimes. I genuinely hope he figures something out. I hope he finds something he cares about enough to work for, and that when that day comes, he discovers what it feels like to build something with your own hands. Because that feeling is real, and it's worth more than anything anyone can give you. I think about my parents too, more than I expected to. I think about the version of this story where they had said, on that Saturday in their living room, "We know we didn't do right by you and we're sorry." I think about how different everything would be if that sentence had been spoken even once. Not because it would fix what happened, but because it would mean they were capable of seeing me, actually seeing me as a person who had been there the whole time. Maybe that day still comes. I'm not holding my breath. But I'm not closing the door either. I'm just making sure that I am the one standing in front of it. Here's what I want to say to you. If you've watched this far, and any part of this felt familiar, if you're the one in your family who is always fine, always capable, always the one who doesn't need anything, you are allowed to need things. You are allowed to have something that belongs entirely to you and to say no when someone tries to take it. Being responsible doesn't mean being a resource. Being capable doesn't mean being available. Being the one who figures things out doesn't mean you owe anyone the results. I spent 29 years being the responsible one. I spent the last 3 learning that responsible and self-sacrificing are not the same word, and that the people who benefit most from your confusion on that point are exactly the people you should stop explaining yourself to. That's my story. I hope it helps somebody. If it did, leave me a comment below. Tell me your city, tell me what time it is where you are, and tell me if any part of this felt like yours. I read every comment on this channel, and I'll be here. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, someone who is always the one who handles it, who holds it together, who never makes a fuss, share this with them. Because sometimes you need to hear that someone else has been in that room and walked out of it and been okay. I'm okay. More than okay. And so are you.